There has been loss in positions in agriculture, so that developed countries in its contribution to the product and employment is scarce. A proper interaction between the agricultural sector and the rest of the production system has historically been crucial not only to avoid bottlenecks, but also to maximize the potential for growth. Moreover, agriculture's contribution to economic growth has been changing along the different stages of development. If the initial stages in industry and services demand from agriculture manpower and financial resources, in more advanced stages, farmers must take on new tasks related to conservation and maintenance of rural areas. Furthermore, the progressive liberalization of trade requires a highly competitive agriculture. A common way to divide agriculture is through guidelines that integrate production units with a similar output. The production structure of Spanish agriculture has evolved depending on the pattern followed by the food demand. But the most notable is the significant expansion experienced by three directions: vineyards, olive groves, and granivoros, which together have tripled their share of the Spanish agricultural output between 1987 and 2005. On the other hand, we can make a classification of the guidelines in terms of territorial requirements per unit of product. If they are above the average of all reference, productions are extensive, and if they are under the average of all reference, productions are intensive. The vigorous economic growth for the period 1960-1975 undermined the foundation on which was based traditional agriculture, a factorial endowment characterized by the existence of a workforce as abundant as poorly remunerated, and the balance between supply and demand food poorly diversified in line with the low level of per capita income. Well, intense rural migration laid the groundwork for a quick replacement for working capital, while urbanization and improved standard of living prompt major changes. Since then, the Spanish agriculture has not ceased to know a profound process of trying to adapt to this changing landscape by the demand side of the food and radically altering its factorial endowment. This process of transformation and adaptation has not ended, and farmers have to take on new challenges. The agriculture is a sector that has rapidly lost importance in the Spanish economy. On the one hand, consumers' preferences are altered by economic growth by reducing the proportion of household expenditure for food and other agricultural supply has been changing nature, so that the fraction of the same, which is an intermediate output, has been increased dramatically. The combination of these two facts is what precipitated the accelerated loss of position of agriculture in the productive fabric. There has been a growing international integration because the Spanish agricultural sector has managed to take advantage of their integration into the EU of properly exploiting their comparative advantages in a number of productions typical of the Mediterranean area. CAP stands for Common Agricultural Policy. It's a system of European Union agricultural subsidies and programs. The CAP combines a direct subsidy payment for crops and cultivated land with price support mechanisms, including guarantee minimum prices, import tariffs, and quotas on certain goods from outside the EU. The CAP recognized the need to take account of the social structure of agriculture and of the structural and natural disparities between the various agricultural regions, and to effect the appropriate adjustments by degrees. Financial management is carried out by the European Agricultural Guidance and Guarantee Fund. The creation of a common agricultural policy was proposed in 1960 by the European Commission. It followed the signing of the Treaty of Rome in 1957, which established the common market. Reforms of the system are currently underway, reducing import controls and transferring subsidy to land stewardship rather than specific crop productions, phased from 2005 to 2012. Until 1992, the agricultural expenditure of the European Union represented nearly 61% of the EU's budget. by 2013, the share of the traditional CAP spending will have almost halved to 32%. By 1962, three principles had been established to guide the CAP: market unity, community preference, and financial solidarity. Since then, the CAP has been a central element in the European institutional system. Most noteworthy elements from the Commission proposal for the CAP reform: decoupling, which means one unique production support per farm. It's what's called single farm payment. Conditionality, which means farmers will have full freedom in their production and investment decision, ensuring compliance with a series of legal norms, cross-compliance. Conditions relating to environmental, food safety, and animal welfare standards. Dynamic modulation, which is gradual reduction of all aids with a maximum aid of 300,000 euros per farmer. Sustainable rural development. The protection and help given to European agriculture is simultaneously preventing the Third World from exporting its agricultural goods. This is putting Third World farmers out of business. But at the same time, many European farmers have found that without these payments, their business would not be able to survive. All this must still be solved. During recent decades, the Spanish agrarian offer has been changing to respond to the new demand for food. With the addition of Spain to the EU, the participation of meat, fruits and vegetables in the total output has continued to increase, while the contribution of milk and cereals production has declined, due to limitations imposed by the European Commission to curb the growth of surplus in these agricultural products. Developed countries have promoted policies for agricultural self-sufficiency more than in any other sector. The agricultural sector has been subject to extensive regulation and strong external protection. This has encouraged some productions which have grown in excess and have even been exported as a way to give a disposal to the surplus generated by these policies. The keys to specialization are domestic demand, the protection from foreign competition and interregulation, and the existing comparative advantages for each product. Spanish participation in agricultural production in the European Union, 1987-2005. We can emphasize that the total registered has risen from 10% to 15%, a significant amount which has been registered in all directions to a greater or lesser degree. It is also noteworthy that the Spanish weight decreases if we take as reference the EU 25. But we can see that the share falls from 50% to 12.9%, which proves that the contribution of the 13 new states to agricultural output is reduced. For the productive efficiency analysis, it's necessary to consider on the one hand the analysis of productivity at work, and on the other an analysis of efficiency depending on the economic dimension of the units produced. Productivity aggregate analysis. Productivity is the real gross value added divided by the farmland available per person employed. In the board, we can see the evolution of labor productivity in Spanish agriculture. Since it has tripled, we emphasize that labor productivity has experienced significant gains in the past decades. Productivity growth is due to the agricultural employment, which has suffered a great reduction, coupled with increased production, and has resulted in an increase in productivity of labor. Land factor. The area available for exploitation determines both its economic dimension as its efficiency, composed of a large number of very small-sized farms located on the edges of the economic marginality. Capital per unit of final product. It has increased dramatically due to the mechanization of agriculture. Conclusion. The situation in Spanish agriculture is critical. Over the past 2 decades, the industry has continued to intense restructuring that began in 1960, with losses of participation in aggregate GDP and employment. The integration into Green Europe brings advances in opening to the outside world. The capitalization process has continued to make progress in the last 2 decades. The future is full of uncertainties.